five-time All-Star Marcus Johnson.
Alongside Marcus Johnson.
What's up, everybody? Hey, this is the Here District, captain of this vessel. And I got my first mate, my number one son, Chris Johnson.
What up? Talk to me.
Holla!
Let it rain, man. Let it rain.
I guess what? We're going back into the show Friday.
Can't pass us all the breakfast.
Can't pass
Go fight. Welcome everybody to the Here District. Marcus Johnson.
You're listening to a Bucks Plus audio production on the Bucks Plus Network.
Your weekly pulse on the Milwaukee Bucks, straight from a Bucks legend. This is Here District with Marcus Johnson, alongside his son and 1995 NCAA champion, Chris. Here's MJ.
All right, welcome everybody to Here District. I'm the captain of this vessel, Marcus Johnson, Captain Johnson, and my first mate, Chris Johnson, my son, the only father and son tandem to win a national championship at the same school, 20 years apart. I got my UCLA polo on. You see that logo, Chris?
Nice.
That's that old
Under
school.
Armour.
That's that old school Under Armour. We had to get rid of that, but
We gotta update you. We gotta update you.
Yeah, and that's my hope that the UCLA brass will see that and send us a whole bunch of gear with the whole Nike thing going on. But man, look, let's introduce our guest. Ramona Shelburne is a senior NBA writer for ESPN, and welcome to Here District, Ramona. First of all.
What's up?
You got it. Blessed to be on with like two LA legends, man. I
Yeah.
followed both of your careers forever.
Well, we appreciate that. And just digging into your background a bit, I mean, we were talking before the show started. I mean, you've got some pretty strong UCLA roots yourself, young
I
lady.
do. Yeah. You know, my parents met at UCLA. My dad was he worked at Westward Ho Market over there. You know where that is, Marcus?
Sure, of course.
He works at Westward Ho Market.
Boulevard. Yeah. Oh, of course.
And my mom was a dance major, and so she was like young and hot, and he was a grocery store checker, and he was really good at it. And he turned to her and he goes, "Don't I know you from somewhere?" And she was like, "Well, I mean, we both go to UCLA." And I was like, "Oh, what a line, Dad! That's
Okay.
a great line." So that's where I come from.
Yeah. No. What was he like a young grocery checker at Westwood? Or was he older, senior,
Yeah.
and she was
No,
younger?
no, he was. I think he's 2 years older than my mom. So he was,
Okay.
and he was just a little. He's from Bakersfield, so he went to South High in Bakersfield, and
Right.
had to like work to put himself through college. So like he didn't have any money. He's like drove down from Bakersfield, slept in his car the first week of school, and
Right.
like he had to get jobs. And so like this was his job. He was really good at being a grocery store bagger, and like that's how he met my mom. Because like here comes this hot chick coming in. I guess he just shoot your shot. I guess you know.
Hey,
Hey,
you only
worked
live
out.
once.
You only
And
live
here
once.
I am.
Right.
You are.
All she can say is no. Now you're the only child, and
I have a younger brother.
Okay.
brother.
Yeah, and then
who's,
from West
my brother
Hills,
Marshall.
West
Yeah,
Hills,
So I'm out in the valley.
You played some softball and at
Yeah.
El Camino Real High School.
El
What do they
Camino
call it?
Real.
ECR.
Yep.
El Camino Real.
ECR.
Okay.
And back then we were the Conquistadors, but they changed their name now, the Royals.
man.
Yeah, played softball, graduated in 1997. So we Chris and I think we overlapped a little bit. I was always reading about you in the LA Times.
Right.
Plus my parents were like Bruins. So like then the UCLA connection. My dad would always talk about you, Marcus.
Okay.
And so I know the whole, like I was a huge UCLA fan growing up. Like, you know, all you guys know Toby Bailey, right? You know,
Oh,
you
yeah.
had, Tyus Edney.
So-
I know
so-
all the O'Bannons, you know.
Yeah,
I know all
Tyus
those, yeah.
Eddie's actually a cousin of ours. We say that pretty much every
Is he?
single show. Yeah, he's
Point four.
found out.
Point
Found
four.
out at
I mean,
it-
I'll never forget
found
that
it-
against Missouri.
Found
No,
out
yeah.
found out at a family reunion. People came up to me. You got a cousin going to UCLA. I was like, bring him over. They brought over this little tiny dude. I was like, yeah, whatever, okay. And then
No way we're related.
yeah, well, I didn't think much of it. You know, Long Beach Poly. I knew UCLA.
Yeah,
Jim Herrick.
yeah.
He was going to be good, but then he played against I think Indiana his freshman year and kind of turned the whole game around with his speed.
yeah.
And I'm like,
Yep.
that's my cousin. That's my cousin. I started claiming
There
him
you
after
go.
that. So
There
but
you
before I was kind of off him, like, yeah, whatever. But anyway.
Chris, who'd you play with at Crenshaw? That was you played with a couple guys in high school.
Tremaine Folks was one.
Yeah, Tremaine Folks.
Tremaine ended up being drafted by the Nuggets, was Pac-12 Freshman of the Year at Cal. Yeah, so he was a high-flying leaper. A bunch of guys that made it D1 and continued to play professionally overseas and stuff like that.
Yeah, you guys won state, right? That's what I remember following. You like won
back to back.
Two-time
There it
state
is.
champions, two-time city. It was a great run, Ramona. If you remember, it was a
I
dominant
do remember.
run.
That's.
I mean, it was a
I
dominant
followed
run.
it.
I can't lie. I'm so glad that you can vouch for that because
I
Yeah.
totally vouch for it. I read about it in the LA. You guys were like always in the LA Times, so I was always, and I was reading it back then because that's what we did back then, right? We
Yeah.
followed
Yeah,
it, all the hot teams.
Heck yeah. Talk about, Ramona, real quick. Growing
Yeah.
up in LA, right? We grew up in LA in the backdrop of, the Lakers, the Dodgers, championship organizations. How much did the voices of like the Lakers, the Dodgers, or the legends of the LA Times, a Jim Murray or Alan Malamud, how much did these people in LA inspire you to become a sports writer?
I mean, I grew up reading the LA Times, right? So it's funny. I do shows with Bill Plaschke now, and I'm like, I grew up reading you. He's like, stop saying that. Like, made me feel really old. But I used to read all those Jim Murray and Eric Sondheimer. By the way, we got to give a shout out to Eric Sondheimer.
No
Right?
question.
Definitely.
Sandy,
He's been doing it
Sandy in the
forever.
building.
Yeah.
Sandy.
Yeah.
Who
Look,
else?
I didn't talk to Sandy for a number of years because after we got upset by Idaho State, my senior year, which Chris never let me live down for years until they lost to Princeton. But Eric Sondheimer, he blasted me in a column. Didn't really blast me, but just kind of criticized my lack of whatever. But he didn't know when we had lost that game, I had a impacted wisdom tooth that had to be chiseled out of my jaw that morning, and I was on meds. I was not supposed to play. I think I had 20 in the first half and 1 point in the second half, but I just ran out of gas. But he talked about me. So I didn't talk to Eric for a long time. We didn't. It was actually Michael Sondheimer. It was actually Michael Sondheimer, the brother. Michael, the brother. That we didn't talk for a while.
Ramona, quick trivia question: do you know where Eric got his kind of first beat, where he got his start covering? Who he covered? Do you know who it is?
Well, he was started at the Daily News, right? Eric was originally the Daily News.
And it was an athlete, big time guy, dual sport. You should know
John
this.
Elway.
There you go.
Is it right?
Was it?
Granada Hill?
Was it?
John Elway, Granada,
Wow.
baby.
Yeah.
Good job,
I
Ramona.
know my Valley history. Listen,
I
I started at the Daily News. So I had I took on one, it was like this day, and I would pick, like, I'd go in the Daily News archives and I would just search 1987, 1973, and I'd be like, whatever the date was, and I would find some, like, callback. And that was like one of my things that I used to do. So I know everything from like way back. Like, I remember when I was writing about Drew Holiday. And I went up to his mom and I go, hey, I was writing about you when you were at Stanford, Ohio. You were a track star. And then like, I know
That's
Toya,
crazy.
right? That's you. Like, and it was like, because I had looked her up from 19 whatever she would. I don't know what year it was, but she was like a star herself. And like, so I know almost every athlete from the San Fernando Valley just because I used to do that feature that we had in the Daily News. So anybody good, I could almost tell you whatever the name of their high school was.
We'll talk about things coming full circle. So Chris started out at Montclair Prep High School. And,
which doesn't exist anymore. I know.
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. But that's where Michael Jackson, Cher, the Kardashians.
Oh yeah.
Eddie Cibrian,
Josiah Johnson.
Josiah
Johnson.
Yeah.
But
that's where everybody went before Sierra Canyon.
Yes.
Exactly.
They had a boarding school, so we had some foreign students on camp. But the thing is, Ramona, is that in the league championship, they were ineligible his freshman year or sophomore year.
Eric Sondheimer wrote a lot of those stories. I remember.
Yeah. But they played. So their championship was against Cabell Hall. They had a player by the name of Alex Lopez. He's the older brother of Brooke and Robin Lopez. Brooke and Robin would be on the sidelines at 3 years old, running like about 5 feet tall with these Garanimals on overalls and
their
just
afros. They had
the
cute
the big blonde afros, the cutest little things. And so, I mean, we just go way back. So anyway, I digress. But let's talk about your journey as a writer. The first thing that stood out to me, I mean, you're not only a great journalist, writer, all that good stuff. But I mean, you're an athlete. So you went to Stanford. Yeah. I read a piece that you did at Stanford where you talked about
look at you
kind of
research.
Kind of the I won't say struggle, but the challenge is a better word. I mean, because you didn't want people to know that you were an athlete. A lot of people thought you got into Stanford just because you were an athlete. But you were valedictorian in high school also.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So, right. But just talk about how you wound up at Stanford and that as opposed to going to UCLA.
I know. I know. I did always want to go to UCLA when I was growing up because that's where my parents went, and also UCLA was the best in softball. Like Sue Enquist had that rolling, right? So you
Oh
go from
yeah.
Dr. Dot, then you go to Elisa Fernandez. I mean, just all
Yes.
the goats in softball, right? Um, and I remember I still have this. Okay, so I was a sophomore in high school, and I got a note from UCLA softball, and it was like, "Hi Ramona, we followed your progress closely this year in high school and are going to monitor monitor your career going forward. We're very impressed. Keep it up." And I was like, "Oh, they know who I am. Oh my god." And all it was like, "You're on our list," right? Like, it wasn't like you're going to be our UCLA. And I thought it was probably because like when back then I played in the city section. So when the city section had their city championships, we played at Easton
Gotcha.
Stadium. So
Oh, easy.
probably like I played at Easton Stadium and I don't know if they saw the roster or whatever, right? Um, and it's like one of my prized possessions at UCLA. And I was on the radar. Wow. And then I never heard from them again. That's okay. But the truth is like, so you get like sophomore year, you're thinking about a lot of things. And then I took a class, a summer school class at UCLA that summer. And I was like super academic. I took all the AP classes and stuff. So this was like a way of like, let's take a college class. And I drove I had just got my driver's license and I drove over there every day on the 405, not, a couple times a week, whatever it was. And I thought to myself, and I was like, I had fun, but I also felt like, man, if I go to UCLA, this is what I'm never going to leave. I'm just going to live at home with my folks and then drive on the 405 every day. And I was like, I want that college experience. Like, and the only way to really have that is if I leave. I can't just stay home. And I feel like I need to grow. I need to push myself a little bit. And so that's really when I started looking outside of LA. Like I didn't want to go too far, but I wanted to open it up and like just kind of open my mind a little because I know how I am. I'm really close to my folks. I was really close to my family. And if I was just here, it would be too easy to stay. It would be too easy to just not grow. And so that's when, so my junior year, I played on a travel softball team, and that's where in softball, that's kind of how you get recruited is travel ball. And all the girls on my team were older than me. Like I was the young one, and they were all the class above me, which I always recommend. I always think everybody says like, oh, you should be the big fish in a small pond. I'm like, no, you should play up, challenge yourself. But I guess it depends on your maturity level or how you can handle things or whatever. But I liked playing up, and the girls that I played with, they all graduated and went off to college. And I was like, oh, wait, this sucks. I'm the only one still left on the team. There was like me and one other girl. And so then I had to kind of find a new team my senior year, which was really awkward. And I had, kind of already been recruited a little bit, but not, I wasn't like big time recruit or anything. It was just sort of, you send your stuff out, people write you back. And so that senior year I went and played I played on a team called Stealth. So I was on the older team, and then I went and played with the younger team of them. And we had a girl on that team by the name of Jessica Mendoza.
Yes.
You
Yes.
might have heard of her. She works for ESPN. She's
facts.
2-time Olympian, three-time Olympian, something
Big
like
Big
that.
time.
She ended up being my teammate at Stanford, but I was a year older than her. And so I remember I was just playing just to get seen that fall. Like I needed to, like the teams that were watching me, like needed to come say like, hey, can we see you play? And so I didn't really want to play that fall because I was, my team was gone, but I was like, all right, whatever. So I played everywhere. I played first base, which is funny because I'm like 5'2". I don't play first. I'm an outfielder, but I was like, whatever. I just need to get seen. Okay. So I played infield. I played outfield, played first base, catcher, whatever. And I remember the Stanford coaches were going to come down and watch me play. And I was like, look, I don't know what position I'm going to play. Does that matter to you? And they were like, nah, it's okay. We just want to see you out there and hitting, whatever. And I go, okay, good. Cause you need to see this girl on our team. Like there's this girl that I play with and she's like the best player I've ever seen. And like she had told me, and I go, and she swears she wants to go to Stanford. I'm like, there's no way. I would have never thought she would go to Stanford because she should be UCLA, Arizona, top teams, whatever.
Sure.
But she kept asking me about Stanford. And I was like, really? Are you sure is that where you want to go? She goes, it's my dream. So I told my coach, I go, hey, like this girl says she wants to go to Stanford. I think you can get her. Like she's so good. And so I played fine. But then they saw her and they were like, whoa, you're right. And I don't know if it helped me get in or helped them want me, but like, I don't know, like whatever it was.
It didn't hurt.
That's how they got in on Mendoza. Like, no, like they had a chance. And so I'd like to take credit for that. and
Yeah.
she usually lets me, so it was that was good recruiting right there. But anyway, that's ended up. I ended up taking recruiting trips everywhere. I took a trip to Michigan.
Okay.
Took a trip to Harvard, took a trip to Yale, took a trip to
Nice.
Cal, and then Stanford. And then I went I really wanted to go back east, but I don't know, I'm too close to my family. Like
Right.
I was too like, if I go to Boston and I play there, I'm just gonna end up living there my life. I'm gonna be
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna meet somebody there, I'll get married, I'll get a job there, and then all of a sudden I'll come home twice a year on Thanksgiving and my birthday. I mean, I was like, nah,
Yeah.
I need to stay close. So that's how I ended up back at Stanford, and it was going to be Stanford over Cal. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. But quick story. So
take a little shot at Cal. Just a little puff.
yeah. That's okay.
to.
That's okay. You have to. But quick story. So you just reminded me. Now, my family was always a tradition. My parents moved from Louisiana down south because they wanted us to get better academic opportunities. They wanted us to all go to UC school. So we all did and graduated. My two older sisters went to UC Santa Barbara. So it was a tradition where we would drop off the prospective freshmen, drive them up, unpack them, get them settled, and cry and tears and snot going everywhere. So when I went to UCLA, they did the same thing for me. They drove me out to UCLA to Westwood, unpacked my Volvo, crying, tears, and all that. My parents went to a Fedco or some store to pick up some stuff. By the time they got back home, I was sitting in the living room like, "Hey, what's for dinner?" Like, "Wait, boy, what are you doing here? We just dropped you off like an hour ago." I'm like, I was right back home within an hour after they had dropped me off because
Marcus,
was like you
I
said,
relate honestly. Like when you're really close to your family. Like, okay, so I went to Stanford and my mom took me. We made a trip out of the drive up. So we loaded up the van and we drove up, and we were like, let's make a car trip. So we stopped in Pismo Beach the first night from LA, and then on the second night we went to San Francisco. We drove all the way to San Francisco, and but we like kind of stopped and had a couple of nice adventures. Every year we would drive up like that and bring all my stuff, and the first time my parents left, I was like standing there until the last second they were out of view, and I was like crying my eyes out. Meanwhile, like most of the people I was there, they were so excited their parents were leaving. Like they were excited for the freedom, and I was like bawling my eyes out.
I was that way.
Yeah.
You were that
excited
guy
for the freedom,
and like I went back for Thanksgiving, and I remember I was so sad to leave. I came back for Thanksgiving and then I was like, oh, I have to go back there. And it's not that I didn't like Stanford. It's just hard to be away. And then when you get a little taste of home, I literally my mom's driving me to Burbank Airport and I literally had her pull. I was like, Mom, I'll throw up. I'm gonna throw up. She had to pull over threw up on the side of the 134 freeway just because I was like pitting my stomach about going back, leaving home again.
Sure.
So
another
it's okay.
thing
It just means we love our family.
Well, and this is another thing we have in common. Another thing we have in common. So I'm reading about a story that you wrote. You were working on about LeBron James' move from Miami back to Cleveland, and and so your mother Jeanette, you'd always kind of give her the rough draft to get some notes. She's a screenwriter for children's TV shows. Now, what shows has she worked on? Talk about Mom a little bit and what she's done. I mean, that's fascinating to me because I fancy myself as
my mom,
as a screenwriter also.
Yeah, my mom, she wrote on All Dogs Go to Heaven. Do you know that? Like when they made that TV show?
Of course.
So it was a movie and then they made it a TV show. She'd write some episodes there. And she was kind of like she was a dance teacher. This is now we're going way back in the LA high school machine. Okay. So my mom was a dance teacher at Westlake School for Girls, which is now Harvard Westlake. Okay?
Sure.
They merged,
Okay.
but this is before it was even merged. This was like just a girls' school. So she had like Jamie Lee Curtis as her student. She had the girl from Heart. She had like Tony Curtis. Like Tony. She'd see him. She'd be like, "Hi, that's Tony Curtis right there. Oh my god!" Right? Like all the stars sent their daughters there. And so she was a teacher. And then when she had kids, she stopped working. I think it was when she had my brother. She kind of stayed home and just was a stay-at-home mom for a few years. And then wanted to get back to work when we were, I don't know, 7 or 8, 9, something like that. And that's when she started writing. And she just like, I mean, I can't believe she just started out. She wrote a few scripts herself. She met contacts in the industry. She got on a show. She got on that show, All Dogs Go to Heaven. She's still writing. She's still writing.
Yeah.
She's trying to write a coming of age story now as a book. And then I'm like, Mom, we should option that. Let's do it as a screenplay. Like so.
Right.
I mean, everyone in LA, people come to LA with like Hollywood dreams, right? But it's but my mom. This was like literally like such a cool thing to do when you're like, she probably picked this up when she was 40.
Yeah.
And then started out at 40 with 2 kids. That's not easy to do.
No, that's amazing.
I'm laughing because I read something where you said to her like, "Mom, I don't think I'm going to be a writer. I think I'm going to get a real job," or something to that effect. She said that's when she knew you were going to be a writer. You were just being rebellious. Yep. But is that something that you still do? Yep. Do you still bounce ideas off of Mom and still kind of keep her involved? Do you? Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, because the truth is, first, like my mom and I are really close. I see her like all the time. She's always over. I have 2 kids now, so she's always over with the kids too. But my mom knows story. And she knows characters.
Yeah.
And when you're a sports writer, like I think there's a lot of people who write about, the X's and O's and what adjustments they're going to make. There's like news stories or whatever, but I do narrative. Okay. That's what I make my bread and butter on. And like, I develop good relationships with people all around the league. And I get behind, and like what I try to do at least is to try to understand people and understand everything that they're going through. And what's really involved in the whole story. Cause I think so much of what we lose today in the hot take culture that we live in, we lose that these are people. These are people whose dreams that we're talking about. And like, I see guys getting criticized for this or that, or I had to write something on the Bucks this year, and like Adrian Griffin got fired, like 30-13 record. Right. And I had to go behind, okay, what happened with all this? And I remember starting the story with like, I had met the Bucks. I'd met John Horst and Adrian Griffin the previous summer. We had like a long get to know you conversation out at Shutters in Santa Monica. They were like in town for a week. Sure. And then I went over to UCLA a couple times. They were always practicing at UCLA and talked to Dame and Giannis. And they came into the season. Remember, the Bucks were supposed to be like the favorites, and they made the big huge trade right at the beginning of training camp. And I remember talking to Horace, and he loved Adrian Griffin, like loved him. They came up together, and he told me the story about how he named his dog after him. Like, I was like, "You named your dog after Griff?" And he's like, "Yeah, like we lived in the same apartment complex, and we were riding the elevator, and we were looking for a name for our dog, and then I'm in the elevator with Griff, and I go, Griff, that's a good name, and he's a good guy, okay." And like, and it was like, I was like, Horst didn't want to fire Adrian Griffin, he loves him, and like. And I think that that's something you got to convey in that story. Like people think about, oh, he got fired because of whatever. And like so much on the shows, it's just going to be talking about what did Giannis think, or what's going on, how they playing Dame and Giannis together, whatever. But like the truth is, like these are humans. These are people who like waited their whole life to be like Adrian Griffin waited his whole life for a head coaching opportunity, and then he gets it, and then they trade for Dame Lillard and half the team's gone and Drew Holiday's gone. And it's like, whoa, this is not the team that they hired him to coach. And now we're halfway through the season and they don't feel like they have forever to make this decision and they got to do something. And so like my specialty is sort of deeply reported stories that I learned from I've been doing it for a while. So I know a lot of people in the league now, but also like I try to treat people the right way. You try to talk to them and understand them and see things from a human viewpoint as opposed to just hot takes and headlines.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I guess one of the penultimate examples of that is your work on Clipped.
Yeah.
And executive producer and how that came about. I think you were working on another series when all that stuff happened, and your editor is like, no, you got to leave that and get on this story because this is when the tapes came out. I watched a few episodes on Hulu.
You go. You got it, Marcus. Thank you.
FX's Clip. It's actually it's really interesting. They mentioned my name, I think, once. They said, Marcus Johnson broke his neck. So they're talking about the bad luck Clippers.
The bad luck Clippers, yeah.
But talk about how that came about, and that must have been exciting just to watch how it evolved from covering the story to a podcast 30-30, and then all of a sudden now you got it up and running. And I know that process, it's a difficult process.
Because you've done it, right?
Talk about that experience and just how the ups and downs and the excitement of it.
It's interesting because I was covering this it's 2014. You guys are all from here, so you know the scandal, right? You knew Sterling, right?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Too
Okay.
well. Yes.
Yeah. So, I grown up here, so I knew the Clippers. I never disliked the Clippers. Like I rooted for the Clippers, like Ron Harper and those guys. Benoit Benjamin. It was also Ralph Lawler, right? Everybody loved Ralph. Right?
Yeah, sure.
But like they were it was just Sterling. You couldn't get out of it. He couldn't. It was like you couldn't get past him, um, and so like you just knew the history there. And then finally he started doing the right things. He hires Neil Olshey and Vinny Del Negro. He gets Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. They make this big trade for Chris Paul. Like they're doing things the right way. They're finally going to turn it. And the Lakers at that time were not very good. Remember they're in the lottery the whole time.
Sure.
And it felt like, oh my God, at the end of all this, the Clippers are going to get some leg up on things. And so I had covered the Clippers. That was one of my first beats when I was at the Daily News. This is one of those ones where somebody left and they weren't going to hire anyone for the job. And I was like, can I do it? And they were like, yeah, you can cover the Clippers if just the home games are not going to pay for you to travel anywhere. But if you want to do that after you get done covering that high school volleyball game or high school football game or something, go ahead. I was like, man. All right, yeah, okay, I'll do that. So I would like cover a high school softball game and like drive down to Staples Center at night.
Nice.
And that's what you do when you're coming up. You just cover 3 things at once, and I'd be writing my softball story during the first half, and I'm like, what am I doing? It's like a professional NBA game. Come on, But I was just anything to get a foothold, anything to cover the league, whatever. But it was great that I did that because I knew the Clippers. Like I knew the executives there. I knew Elgin Baylor, I knew the people who worked there for years and years and years. And so when this story happened in 2014, I was uniquely situated to cover it. Like when a big breaking news story happens, that's not when you call people for the first time, right?
Yeah.
You need to have existing relationships. People need to know you and trust you. And because I had covered them for so many years and because I knew them and I was around when nobody else was around, I think that really helped. And it also just felt like this was such a big story that like, what am I doing running off to go cover the Wizards? I was going to go try to write something about John Wall. And then I was going to go try to write something about it was the Blazers were winning that series. Blazers Rockets. That's where it was when the tapes came out. And my editor was right. Like he was like, look, this story is still going on. This is like international news. This is not just, the tapes came out and whatever. It's like, oh, what are they going to do? Are they going to force him to sell the team? Like, how are they allowed to do that? Are the players going to boycott? And then when Adam Silver bans him for life, then it's like, oh, who's going to buy the team? Remember when Oprah was trying to buy the team and Magic was trying to buy the team and right? And so this was just a big, giant story. And the more I dug into it and the more I saw the weird, awkward love triangle behind it, with Vistaviano and Shelley and Donald. And I really knew those players very well. Like I knew Blake Griffin really well, Chris Paul, DeAndre, all those guys. The more I was just like, you just got to stay on this story. Like this is the story. And everything there's a new second round playoff game, every year. There's a new feature to write every week. There's only 1 or 2 of these kind of stories that come along in your career. And so my editor, I'll give him a lot of credit for that. He kind of showed me the light, guy by the name of Eric Neal. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And I felt weird not covering the playoffs, right? Like games were going on and I was sitting at home or whatever, but it was really good. And then I always thought it should be more than just me writing a couple of magazine stories. I thought it should be I like from the beginning, even while I was in it, I was like, this should be a movie or it should be a scripted series or something. And it was right around the time People versus OJ came out. Remember that show?
Sure, of course. For
sure. And so that's what I was like, it should be like People versus OJ. Like who's going to play Sterling and who's going to play Adam Silver and who's going to play Stiviano, right? And so I would pitch this to everyone. Like at ESPN, I'd be like, come on, we should do it. And the ESPN doesn't do scripted stories though. They do 30 for 30s. And so our director of development was like, hey, we don't, if you want to do something like that's scripted or a narrative, you got to go to ABC Studios or something like that. But why don't we do it as a podcast, like a narrative podcast? Because that way, it's like writing a book, but people hear you and they hear the story. So it was a really good idea. It was a lot of work tell you that. It was
Right.
like 18 months of work to do that podcast. But it showed everyone what I was talking about the whole time. Like, this story has so many layers. This story is so wild. Like, you can't make this stuff up. And then once you heard it on the podcast, then I had a lot of offers. People came, a lot of producers came out and were like, oh, now I see what you mean. And so the woman who called me from her name is Nina Jacobson. She's from Color Force, which is the people who made People vs. OJ. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. Like, we're gonna go with you, because that's the show that I love that show when it came out. And this is like event casting. I know you make good TV. There's somebody I know is going to do a good job with it, and that's kind of how it ended up at FX. But that was 5 years ago.
Yeah,
it took 5 years to get it made. Writing scripts, casting, shooting, editing, all of that.
Well, so I auditioned for a couple of parts in that. Doc
Did
Rivers
you?
because of the hairline. And then,
you could have been a good Doc.
Well, but then I found out who they had hired, Larry Fishburne, and I work with Lawrence. His first movie was Cornbread Earl and Me that we did together back in 1974. Jamal Wilkes, Keith Wilkes at the time, was Cornbread, and Lawrence Fishburne was this brilliant young 12-year-old actor from New York that everybody, and he was really, really, really good in that. Yeah. But the other part I had auditioned for that I thought I had a legitimate chance to get was the Elgin Baylor role.
Yeah.
That was Clifton Davis. Clifton Davis got it. Really good actor, and did a great job in that. So it was all good. But
you could have got one of your assistant coaches jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, well,
but those weren't. They didn't have too many lines. The guy I thought they were going to give my guy
Alvin Gentry.
Alvin Gentry had more lines.
Yeah, Alvin Gentry character was pretty good, but Ed O'Neill was like amazing. Have they nominated? There's Emmy nominations.
Not yet. We're the next cycle.
Okay, because he's got to have one. I think the show should get a lot of consideration. But Ed O'Neill, man,
and then God, right?
The lady who played Shelley, what was that actress's name?
Her name is Jackie Weaver. She's Australian.
Wow. So what else has she been in? Where else has she been? I've never. What else has she been in?
Silver Linings Playbook. You've seen her in that.
Okay.
You've seen her in a few things, but she's such a good. She's like the Australian Meryl Streep. Like she's been in so many things. She's so versatile. And when she read, I'll tell you, we went to the table read, and she came in with the wig on, the Shelley wig, and she's 5'1" maybe. And she had the shoes on. She came in like full character, and she started talking, and I was like, oh my God, she sounds just like Shelley. Like, that's nuts, right? I think all four of them should get nominated. V. Stiviano, Cleopatra Coleman. Holy,
she was good.
Right?
Really, really good.
Really good. And then your boy Larry's pretty good too, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, of course. He's how much did Doc Rivers? Yeah. I see his name as a consultant, but how much was he involved with Lawrence Fishburne and let him know the ins and outs? We did Blue Chips a few years back, and Bobby Knight really worked with Nick Nolte on developing that character. Was Doc like that?
No, not that much. They got together for like a weekend. I think. I can't remember who went to who. Like, I don't know if Doc went to Lawrence's house or Lawrence went to Doc's house, something like. But they definitely got together and spent some time together. But like Doc wasn't on set. I don't think he ever came to set. He was involved mostly with the writer of the show. Right, her name is Gina Welsh. And so when we first started doing this show, obviously it's based on the podcast, and it's based on hundreds of hours of interviews that I did for the podcast. Right. But which not all of them make the show. Right. So there's like so many, like, you'll have interviews with somebody that's 2-hour interview, and you use like 2 minutes of it. Right. Sure. So they had access to everything, but I said to them, I go, listen, one of the things that I feel like you can get a lot out of the podcast and the interviews, but like for this show to feel real, like you really need to talk to Doc. Like, I wasn't in the locker room with him. I wasn't, Doc and I know each other really well from a number of years, but like, I can't call him and then relay his thoughts to you. That's inappropriate for me as a journalist to do. Like, you need to set up your own relationship with Doc. And so, and I felt like, we had done an interview with Doc for the podcast, but it was like 30 minutes, and they had a million more questions, and he was really the central character of the show. And like, you just need to talk to him more. And so like, you can call him and ask him if he'll talk to you, but like, if I were you, I would set up your own relationship. So they did. I think they called his people and set it up, but I don't think he was really as involved with, he was not as involved with Lawrence as you think. Like I think they really just spent like some time together.
Well, the one thing I got to know, and then Chris, you can jump in
Yeah.
right after this. But the sauna scenes at Doc's apartment between Doc and
Yeah.
LeVar Burton, was that artistic licensing taken, or was that real? Did that really happen? Did he cross
It's
paths
artistic
with LeVar?
license to some extent. Okay. So he definitely, he didn't have I don't think he had a real relationship with LeVar Burton, but he did have a few people that he would call a lot. And I do think they had a sauna at his apartment that he would see that ugly white guy in there. Remember that guy who comes in and he's like gross?
Right,
Definitely.
right.
I think that's real.
Okay.
And then I think they were looking for a confidant for him. But then here's what the crazy part is. When they were trying to figure out, they wanted, and because a lot of characters in this are composite characters.
Sure.
Okay, so V's friend Deja, who I love that character, she's based on 3 or 4 people, right?
Sure.
Or Shelley's friend Justine, she's based on 3 or 4 real people, but they're just, you can't have 3 or 4 people. You got to put everything into one. You know how Hollywood goes,
sure.
right? So they needed a confidant for Doc, and I kept telling him, I go, look. He talked to Alvin Gentry a lot. You can have Alvin as the confidant, or you could have his mom. I know he talked to his mom. I know he talked to Wayne Embry. He talked to Wayne a lot. And they felt like, I think they could have casted. They could have done that with Alvin. That would have worked. It would have been hard with his mom because then you have to tell more of a backstory. You can't just randomly have him call his mom, right?
Right.
And she's not a known person. And then Wayne Embry, that's another whole backstory you have to establish. So it's everything is you have to establish the backstory. So what can you do to have him have a confidant? And the writer's room was let's have him talk to another African-American man who's about his age, who's also famous. So they can relate in ways immediately.
Yeah.
And Rembert Brown tells this story really well. I'll plug another thing. Okay. So I did a companion podcast to the show. It's called Let's Talk Clipped. And we have producers on the show. We have actors on the show. So you can hear Ed O'Neill on the show. You can hear him on episode 5 of that. It's just the reaction episodes to the TV show. Anyway, so Rembert Brown was one of the writers and producers, and he was just Googling African-American actors between 45 and 65, celebrities. And he just came up with LeVar Burton, and he was yeah, well, it turns out Lawrence Fishburne and LeVar Burton are actually friends, and they have conversations, deep conversations all the time about race and things like that in the hot tub, in the sauna. That's real. And they were Lawrence, why didn't you just tell us that? We would have just cast LeVar right away. But then it was just kind of perfect because they did have a rapport already.
Yeah.
Ramona, do you think that sort of the fallout from the Sterling episodes, the incident, do you think that had an effect on how owners build relationships with players and that dynamic? Was it already moving towards that, or was that definitely a turning point in owner-player relations in the NBA?
I think that was a huge turning point. I mean, look, I think owners have always had good relationships with star players, right? If you're a smart owner, if you're Jerry Buss, you're gonna be friends with Magic, okay?
Yeah.
You're gonna try to develop a relationship. If you're Joe Lacob, you're gonna get to know Steph Curry, okay?
Sure.
The Bucks owners, whoever they may be, right? They change sometimes, right? They're gonna get to know Giannis, but I think it's the Sterling episode really showed you, and it's something Mark Cuban even said, which is the slippery slope of this, right? Used to be owners had a certain level of immunity. They had the power because they owned the team. Their word meant they could just decide something and do it. You could be a scoundrel. You could have scandals, and you just kind of got away with it because there was no recourse for the league. There was no recourse for the players. And I think a lot of what happens in the Sterling story, and in the story I tell on the podcast and in the show, is anybody with a cell phone, man. Anybody can take you down now. Anybody catch you saying something you shouldn't be saying, or something that if it was aired publicly would come across really bad. It's the great equalizer. And that what I think the players learn too is they have a voice too. I mean, I'll never forget Baron Davis talking about how Sterling would heckle him. Remember when they signed Baron Davis and Sterling sat courtside and
you're fat, you're a fat fatty. You're just a fat fatty. Yeah.
And And like, only thing he could do was, I mean, I was proud of Barron for saying this, that he, you know, he went and talked to Mark Spears about it and they wrote the story. And I was like, good for you that you had the guts to do that. But like most of the time players just kind of took it. Like I had so many stories of players talking about what it was like in that locker room. I'm sure you have a few, you know, the way he would come in the locker room with his friends and kind of ogle the players and violate their personal space. I mean, this was the stories were like they never ending. Like every year, like for the podcast, we talked to Darius Miles and Quentin Richardson and Olden Polynice. I mean, everybody from every era had a story or two or 10 of how they felt objectified or dehumanized. And, you know, Elgin Baylor, I think was the right person to tell that story about, you know, the plantation mentality in his lawsuit. Sure. And like, it didn't go anywhere. I think Elgin might've won that story if he didn't also sue the NBA.
Yeah.
That's what hurt that lawsuit.
Well, Donald Sterling. So I had a tragic accident, lost a son in a drowning backyard swimming pool accident. Marcus Johnson Jr., 17 months old. So I run into Aileen Voisin. You know Aileen?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I know Aileen.
Sacramento.
So Aileen, she's covering for the Herald Examiner. She reaches out to me. She's like, Marcus, I talked to Donald Sterling, and Donald wants you to call him. I was like, Aileen, I'm not in the mood to talk to Donald. I don't know if that's a good idea. No, he's really, really reached out and really wants to talk to you. Yeah. So I wound up calling Donald Sterling, and I'll never forget this, Ramona. I mean, I got on the phone and Donald just launched into how I was the worst piece of scum and I couldn't be responsible for taking care of my kids. And by the time he got through with me, my name would be, you know, worth absolutely nothing in Los Angeles. And this is because we were involved in a contract dispute and you better accept our offer. And it was like and I just got off the phone just like, you know, I tried to play it off talking to him, but I just got off the phone shook. And ever since that, you know, I haven't given it a lot of thought since we're talking about this, but Donald had so many stories like that. There were, I remember in a clip, there was the scene at the white party where he's holding Blake Griffin's hand and introducing him to everybody, but he's taking him by the hand, and people are like, well, that's not realistic. I remember one of his Christmas parties. It wasn't a white party, but it was at the Malibu house. It was at the Malibu house. And there was our PR guy was named Scott. I forgot Scott's last name. He was a former Laker ball boy, but he came up to me and says, Donald wants you to take a picture with Santa Claus. I was like, okay, all right, whatever. Then I got there and Scott was like, well, he wants you to sit in Santa's laps. You want all the players to sit in Santa's lap. I was like, Scott, I'm not sitting in Santa's lap. I'm a grown ass man. What are you talking about?
No.
But Scott was like, if I don't do it, Marcus, I'm going to get fired. Please, please. So I sat in Santa's lap. And they took his hat off and palmed his head like it was a basketball and tried to look defiant, as defiant as I could as a 30-year-old man sitting in Santa's lap. But it was just a lot of crap like that, man, that you're dredging up old memories. I hate to digress into that realm, but and so when it happened that he lost the team and V. Stiviano came out with the tapes and all that, I wasn't necessarily feeling a lot of now Shelly. I liked Shelly a lot. Shelly was always cool. But when that happened with Donald, it was like, you know, it was just it was heading toward something like that with them because of all his past
30 years
actions.
of stories like this. I mean, that's one of the worst stories I've ever heard, by the way, what you said about your son.
Yeah.
Like that's just terrible. Like I can't even describe how terrible that is. But there's like, everybody has these horror stories, and how does this go on for 30 years? Let alone, you know, the team sucked. Like they never made it out of the second round of the playoffs. Right. So you have this team in and I had a lot of theories, right? Like, oh, well, it's kind of like nobody wanted to do anything about it because they don't want, you know, it's just an easy win every year, or they don't have to worry about him as a threat. But then also like, well, they don't want him, if you look into his closet, you don't want anybody looking in your closet, right? Like people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Right. But I think it's also like, it's just, he was an incredible litigator. He was an incredible lawyer. And he did own the franchise. So it's hard to get someone to sell something they own, like their property. He saw it as property, and like there's no way you could shame him into doing anything. And I think that's what we try to get to in the show. That's where Ed is so, I'm so glad you love Ed's performance. Cause like,
oh my goodness,
God, it was,
And it wasn't like he was trying to, be Donald Sterling. You could tell he'd watched some tapes and interviews or whatever. He had the general kind of essence of Donald, but he put his own spin on it from his perspective as an actor, and man, just did a masterful job at that. So it was really good stuff. But again, talking about, and this is the last bit of Clippers stuff I'm gonna get into, because I don't want to stay here to negative. We pride ourselves on being a positive show, but the karma that came back on the Clippers in terms of, they talked about me in that show breaking my neck. I ran into Bedoy Benjamin's stomach that ended my career. I broke my hand, my right hand, the very first day of training camp after I got traded from the Bucks. I was in line. We were doing a drill. I reached in. It felt a little awkward. I told Brad Greenberg, somebody's going to get hurt. Well, this is the way we do things in Los Angeles. This is not Milwaukee. No. The second time I went around, I broke my right hand. Derek Smith, the late, great Derek Smith, was right behind me. He reached in and broke the left pinky on his left hand in the same drill. And so that's when they finally stopped. But then you had Danny Manning. You had, you had Sean Livingston. You had all these players that the Clipper curse, and that's to me. That's kind of,
didn't Lamar Odom break his leg or something? Landing on a basketball and layup lines.
All that stuff. So anyway, but that's enough. But congratulations on Clipped, and when this turn of Emmys come around, hopefully you guys will be right in the mix. And
hey, on my next show, we're gonna make sure you get a part. You should have hit me up before.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
You should have hit me up. I want to put a word in with the casting director.
Yeah. Well, I saw you were rep by CAA, and I was like, oh wow, I should have hit her up. Yeah. No, that's big time stuff. Now, but listen, let's talk a little bit about the Milwaukee Bucks, since this is the Here District, the Milwaukee Buck broadcast.
Yeah.
Just I'm looking at the power rankings, which I always kind of see what the experts are thinking about this next season. They got Boston ranked number 1. Okay,
as they should
be.
Yeah.
The Knicks at number 2 with the additions and bringing back OG and all that good stuff.
Might be a little high. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Number 3, Sixers with PG and Caleb Martin and that crew. Number 4, they got the Pacers. I was a little surprised at that. Mm-hmm. The Pacers, even though
they did win the playoff series.
But they did, but without Giannis, without a healthy Dame, they had the Bucks coming in at number 5. So anyway, just talk about.
I would put Milwaukee at I would put them back at number 2 if I was doing those rankings.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. I think this is I don't want to say the last hurrah. Okay. I don't want to say it like that because I don't want to get aggregated or anything like that. No, I don't have any inside information saying they're going to break it up or anything like that. But it feels like there's pressure on this season because of the age of the players, right? Because the core, Giannis is younger, but the other guys are older because of the injury history, because of how much they gave up to get Dame. And how much they're going to pay Giannis over the next few years, right? Mm-hmm. But it feels like this is a comeback year for them. They had a lot of injuries last year. They were never right. Yeah. Doc came in under very weird circumstances, never really got to put his staff in, never got to put his system in. So I think it's a bounce back year for the Bucks. If everybody's healthy, I think this is a bounce back because we all had them as the number 1 team in the East last year. Come on, after they traded for Dame, don't pretend you didn't. Like everyone out there. Okay. Like we all had them as the team to beat, and they're still that team. And I like they didn't do much in the offseason. They just kind of added to the depth around, which is good. Taurean Prince is a good player. Right. And, but nobody's going to turn heads like they did with Dame last year, but all they really needed was consistency. They needed the big 3 to play together. And I forget how many games they actually played together. It was like maybe 10.
Not a lot. Yeah.
With Middleton and Dame and Giannis. Also, little side note, which you probably have noticed a bit in the Olympics if you've been watching Giannis play for Greece. He's got a little mid-range game. He's been working on that. I don't know if you saw, I put a little cryptic tweet at one point during the finals. I was like, Jason Tatum's trainer, Drew Hanlon, has just barely made it back to the game from
he was
Athens.
in Greece. Yeah, I saw that. I saw your tweet.
Oh, wink, wink.
I saw your tweet. Wow. I saw that. I caught that.
Yeah.
I caught that, Ramona.
I
caught that.
So, you're going to have to, ask your own questions around that.
Yeah.
It could be Thanasis. Okay. But I'm just saying, check out Giannis' mid-range game.
Costas or somebody else. Well, and also Ben Baker has taken
Yep.
over in terms of
Yep.
his development. And if you remember Vin as a player, Vin had a
Vin was
whole
great.
lot of good kind of shake and bake, pull up
Yep.
jumpers from
Mid-range
15.
master.
Yep.
And that's what Giannis had been working with Josh Oppenheimer, who I really respect. I love Josh. He's an LA guy. Went to where did he go to school at? Chaminade. I think Chaminade High School.
Chaminade?
Yeah. Then
That's about my way.
Out your way.
Man, that's
so
like
Josh,
5 minutes from my elementary school.
so Josh was working on him with Josh, one of the best shooting coaches.
Yeah.
Josh is the only coach that Rick Brunson allowed to work with Jalen Brunson growing up because of their connection. And so, but Josh's thing is shooting. And I just think with Giannis, Ramona, with Giannis, you just have to accept the fact that he's never going to be this great 3-point shooter, and just allow Giannis to be Giannis, do what he does. But the fact that you talked about that mid-range game, that's going to help his game a lot. That's where the playoffs get down to.
I think with Giannis, like, this is a revenge year. Like, that sucked for him not to be able to play in the playoffs. That sucks.
Yeah.
It was hard watching it, and we all knew he wasn't really gonna, like later on they were kind of, pretending like he might come back or something. I was like,
right.
I don't think he's coming
Yeah.
back. Unless they would have
Yeah.
won the series, like I think maybe the second round.
Yeah.
It's too dangerous to play with something like that.
Right.
We saw what happened when you push the calf injury like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with Giannis, it's like he's really don't let him get motivated. This is two straight first round exits.
Right.
What happened last time that happened? They won a title in 2021, right? Like when you start doubting him too much, that's when he turns it on. And I think if he can learn to play with Dame and not just on the same court as Dame, that's really going to help. They need to. You give Doc a whole training camp and a whole year where they can work on the 2-man game between them. Like, he's still going downhill all the time. It can't be like Dame's turn, then Giannis's turn. The Dame's turn, then Giannis's turn. It's got to be like they got to make each other better. Like look at. I think you should look at LeBron and AD and that 2-man game that we've been watching in the Olympics. Giannis and AD, like at one point were seen as similar players, right?
Sure.
They came in the league about the same time. They were both stars at the same time. Giannis obviously surpassed him in terms of MVP awards, individual accolades and stuff. But look how LeBron plays with AD. Like
Definitely. They definitely got the chemistry. I mean, they have that symmetry, that chemistry of the big, the small, the guard, the big guy. They read each other's minds. And to your point about Dame and Giannis, at times it did seem like they were just on the same floor together, not necessarily playing together. That take my turn, your turn. I would love to see what happens this season coming up. Giannis with some more mid range, because that's going to open up other options.
Yeah, the pick and pop.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And see, well, hot off the presses here. I got my cell phone. I texted Doc earlier, and he just got back to me. He just got back from Paris. Doc Rivers. He's talking about Dame Rivers being in amazing shape, great shape. He's healthy. He's really happy so you talk about a revenge year. I mean, Dame Lillard averaged 24, 25 points a game last year. Chris and I always have this dispute about if a guy averages 24.8, it's actually rounded up to 25. He's like, who made that up? So he's this generation. But in Dame's world, it was a subpar year. I mean, you look at numbers look good, 25 and 7 or 8 or whatever it was. Sure. But Dame is another guy. You talk about Giannis in a revenge year. Dame, because he didn't work out last summer. He was worried about being traded, getting hurt.
Yeah.
He didn't work out like he normally does. And right now, this is what I wanted to hear from Doc, is that he is working his behind off. And between he and Giannis, they got a lot to prove.
They do. And I also think, like, if you look at the advanced stats, okay, Dame had a good 2-man game going with Brook Lopez.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, in terms of pick and rolls, like Dame knows how to play with Brook. But he and Giannis never quite developed that. And there's all sorts of actions that they can do. And like, I know I keep bringing up LeBron and AD, but like you can look at Steph and Steph and the way he plays with AD, the Steph and the way he plays with Bam, or the way he that big small game is not. There's so many examples for them to draw on. I mean, obviously Giannis likes the ball in his hands. He's good when he brings the ball up. When they play through him, Dame is really good when they play through him. So you have 2 ball dominant guards. I mean, Giannis not guard, but you know what I mean? Point forward. Sure. But it's like, you don't have to trade off. You have to learn how to enhance each other. And like, they have to be committed to it. It has to be a priority for both of them. Right. Because they're both going to sacrifice a little bit doing that. But I think I've talked to Doc about this a lot too, is like, he's got to come up with different actions that they can just bread and butter plays. Yeah. That those two can go to. And they started putting them in, they started finding, but every time they would get comfortable, somebody get hurt.
Well, and I think that's why the additions on the margins will make a huge difference. I mean, between what Tari and Prince can bring in terms of a spot up shooter, with DeLon Wright is a really good spot up 3-point shooter, and then Gary Trent Jr. I love him in terms
that was a good ad.
That catch and shoot toughness. I mean, I just love everything about that acquisition. So that's another good ad.
He had a lot of other options too. I was surprised he was available for them.
Yeah. So, but listen, I want to ask you a couple more things before we let you go. This whole new player thing in podcast, Draymond and Pat Bev, and I mean,
you don't like it?
Well, how do you like it, first of all, and has that impacted your access to these players? Do they feel like we don't really need the middleman anymore? We can go straight to the public with our own stuff. I mean, is that had a effect on your job?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the two you name, right, with Draymond and Pat Bev, right? Like, Pat was like, "Do you subscribe to the podcast?" Right? I wouldn't talk to you unless you did.
Yeah, that was messed up.
Draymond, what's interesting with Draymond is Draymond's like a talker. So, like, I know I've covered the Warriors a lot over the years, and there'd be times where, like, you know how we're, us reporters, we pull guys to the side after the game, like, "Hey, tell me what happened there," and you don't want to ask everything in the press conference. You got to have something different for your story. So he'll go and tell you something, and you're like, "Man, I got to get that story up quick because he's just going to say it on his podcast." You're like, "I got to get that up. Like, I'm losing my exclusivity here." But then I thought about it, like, well, I mean, I guess it's his story, it's his information. Like, I mean,
but they still give up the goods, though. They still give up the goods as long as they got that respect and that rapport that you talked about. But
I do think they save stuff. I do. I like. Okay. I was to be honest, I was surprised that Paul George didn't break his own free agency. Because he's got, he's got a podcast P.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I was surprised he didn't do like, "I'm going to Philly," like tweet it or do a podcast where he, he announces it that way. Because people were doing that before with the Players Tribune or on their own Twitter feeds or Instagrams, and they like to announce their own deals. But then I think if you realize, like, look, that's the way I try to look at it. Like, if it was my story, I'd want to tell my own. I'd want to have my say in it too.
Sure.
But there's also something to be said for, like, you really can't do everything.
No,
like,
no.
Like, I know how hard it is to make a podcast. I know how hard it is to write a story. I have no idea how hard it is to be an NBA player. I only see a tenth of what goes into it, right? And so, like, I just don't know how you have time to be a player and a great podcaster and a business. Like, you got to keep as LeBron likes to say, and I'm sure he got this from somebody, is you got to keep the main thing. So you can have a podcast. I like getting to know guys on their podcasts. I think they say a lot more. You learn a lot more. Like, if you cover the Warriors, you got to listen to Draymond's podcast. See what, like, I was doing a story on Draymond and Clay. No, I was doing a Klay Thompson cover story. And I remember he did an interview with Draymond Green on his podcast. And a lot of the things that, like, they said on that podcast were like research for me and how I was prepping for my interview. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Because, like, Draymond's interesting on his podcast. I like listening to him talk about the game and how he sees things. I don't worry about the access of it, because if you're good, they're going to still talk to you. Like, it's still ESPN. Yeah. It's still, I've been doing this a while. So, like, people know I'm legit in the way that I treat people and the way I'm gonna go about it. What frustrates me is this feeling like, oh, I don't have to talk to the media now because I'm gonna say it on my podcast.
Right.
Because, like, this is something I think, old heads like you understand. Like, you guys don't have anything without the fans. I don't have anything without the fans. You don't have anything, right? Like, you need people who are interested in your sport, who follow the game day to day. I need them to tune into my radio show and my TV shows. I need them to read my stories. You need them to watch your games, go to your games and buy merchandise and buy tickets and stuff. And so, like, the number one, the best thing that we all have to do, like, it's always like about, you got to give people, you can't think that you're bigger than that. You know what I mean? Like, you always have to get down on the level of, like, I need to talk directly to the fans sometimes. I need to, like, it can't just be like, oh, it's proprietary. This is my stuff, like, assume they're going to find what you said on your podcast. Like, no, you do a press conference after every game, because the fans who are following you day in and day out are going to listen to that post game, and they want to know tonight, not 3 weeks from now when you talk about it. Right. And, like, I respect guys that get that understand, like, it's about having that daily conversation about the league, about the teams, and you got to participate in it. I got to participate in it. That's the whole business. That's the whole, it's a game that you guys get to play a game. I get to cover a game. None of us get to have to have real jobs where we have to be, right? Like these are fun jobs that we get to have, like you, right? And so I think it's sometimes I think we all take ourselves a little too seriously, right? You know what I mean?
I'm a journalist. I'm a journalist.
Exactly. Stop it. Nobody's forced. Like I am a journalist. No, I'm not covering the Middle East. I'm not covering presidential politics. I'm talking about basketball.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's relax here. Everybody just do a good job. Be grateful that you get to have this as your job and you get paid to do this. Like, this is awesome what we do.
Right. Have you been watching Have you been watching the Olympics?
Every night. And I already know who wins during the day, and I still watch it at night.
And now Team USA, did you have an opinion on the way they chose the team, or were you indifferent about the selection process? No Caitlin Clark, no Angel Reese, no Enrique. I'm
a little more mad for Enrique than I am for Caitlin.
Okay.
Enrique Ogunbowale. You got to say that.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin's own.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And you know what? I love that she took him down two times in a row in the All-Star game. That was awesome. I said it on the show. It's on NBA today. They were like, "Who you got today in the WNBA All-Star game?" And I was like, the team that has a grudge. So there's Nneka Ogwumike, who should have been on Team USA and got snubbed, and then she got screwed over because she tried to play for Nigeria, and they said, no, you already played too much for Team USA. And I'm like, I still think that's so wrong. I'm still bitter about Candace Parker getting dropped from the team. Right. Yeah. What the heck?
What do you make of all the Team USA politics, the dynamics with Coach Auriemma and the brass that runs that organization?
That's the women's side.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure there's politics on the men's side too, but on the women's side, I don't like that there's politics. The problem is they're going to win by 20 or 30 every night, no matter what, right? They got three times as many good players as any other country, right? So like, it might be close against a team, but they're still going to win by 20. Like, and so like those roster decisions don't have consequences. Like on the men's side, like if you don't pick the right team on the men's side, you might lose. Okay. The rest of the world hasn't caught up yet in women's basketball. And so I think they can get away. Like I thought when I know there's been a lot of, I came into the scene a little bit later, but I'll never get over that Candace Parker one. Like that was like, this is Candace Parker. Yeah. What are you doing? Like, how do you disrespect somebody like that? And where they tell her, you could pull your name out of consideration to avoid the embarrassment of not making the team. And she was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Right. And then Nneka Ogwumike, oh my gosh, she's the head of the players union. She's she's so like important to the women's game. And she put in her time. She played during the summers and the off years and all that. And like, you're going to not put her on the team? Like, what?
Yeah. Why aren't you in Paris? Did you have an opportunity to do you have a chance to go?
No, not this one. So the Olympic beat, ESPN doesn't go that hard on the Olympics because it's NBC joint, right?
Sure.
Okay. And so there's a couple of gigs covering the Olympics, and they're really hard. You like work, you cover 3 events a day and pump out a million features and stuff like that. And it's on all the other sports. And then, if you want to do the Team USA basketball, that's kind of like a job that gets passed down, from person to person. But
you got to be
first was Mark Stein.
Oh, okay, you got to be grandfathered in.
So Mark Stein had the job, and then he passed it to Brian Windhorst. And I think like I'd have to get in line, and then you'd have to do you'd have to do all the off years too. Like you'd have to be in Abu Dhabi and the Philippines and the FIBA championship and the world championship. And I got 2 little kids. Like it's too much time away from home in the summers when I'm already like spending a lot of time away from home.
For sure.
During the year. Right. It's like, like there was a time when covering the Olympics was like my bucket list. Mm-hmm. I was like, I love it. And I was at the Daily News, a good story. We can end on this if you want. But it's 2008. And I apply for the bureau that's going to cover the Olympics for the media news group. Okay, so that's at the time the Daily News was part of the San Jose Mercury News, and there was this Salt Lake Tribune, and there was like probably 20 papers around the country that were part of this big conglomerate, and they were going to have a bureau with like 3 or 4 reporters who were going to cover like the hometown stories, right? So like, oh, we got an athlete from Utah. Okay, you're gonna write about that one, and we got somebody from LA. Then you write for the Daily News. Like, and I got picked for it, and I was like, I was almost out of the business at that point because I've been grinding, trying to get a step up, trying to get a promotion. And I was like, I just can't keep covering high school sports forever, like, and making no money. And I'm living in a 1-bedroom and I'm like, I'm coming up on 30, I think I was like 28, 29 at the time. And like, that moment, that gut check moment in your career,
For sure.
you're like, I'm either going to make it or I'm going to have to pivot. And I had done an internship at KNBC, which was like the NBC affiliate. And I was like, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to go into news production. I'm going to be a producer. And I went on ride-alongs with Beverly White out here in LA. I don't know if you know her. She's in the show Clip, by the way. I got her a cameo. Cause I was like, that was my girl. Like she was so good to me. I was like, I got to pay her back here, get her a little cameo in my show. So I was going to get a EA job, editorial assistant. And then I got picked to cover the Olympics. And I was like, man, that was a big choice. Like I had to say no to NBC because I had to stick around for the Olympics. It was like a whole year away and I wasn't going to give that up. So I sit around and I'm like, I was content with my decision, but it was still a hard one because then I still wasn't making it. I was like the local columnist covering high schools, whatever. And like 6 months before the Olympics, I get a call from the lady and she goes, hey, I'm so sorry to call you like this, but I wanted to let you know as soon as we knew so you can make other plans. And she was like, due to budget cuts, we're not going to have the bureau in Beijing. And I was like, what? Wow, that's tough. And like, I was like, I turned down a job because of this. Like, oh my gosh. And, okay. But I had been so excited about covering the Olympics. Like this was such a bucket list for me. And I'd already been talking to all my softball friends. Like this was the last year softball was in the Olympics. So I was already planning on going a week early and like spending some time seeing China and then also going to some USA softball events. And I had already had so many plans that I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can use my credential and I'll do some freelance work. Like maybe I could freelance for the Daily News. Like I'll pay my way there, but I'll get paid back, doing freelance for us or for whatever newspaper will hire me. And that was my initial plan. And then after a while, they're like, nah, you know what? We can't have you do that either because insurance reasons, if anything happens, like you're on our insurance. I'm like, killing me right now. Okay, I'm literally going to work for free. Okay, fine. And then I just said, I'm just going to go as a fan because I just wanted to go. That was like my Olympic dream. Yep. Yeah. And I already had plans with my friends to go a week early. And so I just went. Like me and my friends from college, like we went. I just became this USA softball fan. Like I got like Mendoza and her parents were there, and like a bunch of the girls I played with, Natasha Watley, Stacey Newman, all the UCLA kids, right? Yeah, I was trying to give Soraya Flowers. Yeah, I know. Yeah. And they were all there. And hang on, here comes my son. Danny, say hi.
Hey, what up?
It's Marcus and Chris.
What's up?
Say hi.
What's up?
Come here.
What's up now? What's up, young man?
Anyway, I should wrap it up on that, huh?
Yeah.
He's 5. Anyway, so I still went and I became this big USA softball fan and I saw Usain Bolt. Mommy, and it was so fun. I know. Danny, 1 minute.
Mommy. First things first. First things first. Take care of it. Well, look, we're not gonna keep you any longer.
Come here, come on TV, Danny. Come here.
Please, bring him in. Bring him in.
Come here. It's fathers and sons. You get mothers and sons too. Come here. Come on TV. Here.
Hey, what's up, man? Say hello.
Hey. See yourself. Okay.
Listen, Ramona Shelburne, this has been excellent. We appreciate you so much coming to Here District this afternoon. Senior writer for NBA writer for ESPN, and also executive producer for Clipped on Hulu. FX's Clipped on Hulu, and we hope to see you come Emmy night up on
Let's
stage.
Let's get dressed up. And you're in my next show, Marcus. Okay.
All right, I appreciate
I'll make sure
you
you get in the next show.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you so much. Take care of the little boy. All right, thank you so much.
Take care.
This has been a Bucks Plus audio production.